Hello everyone, my name is Keely. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of December. So I managed to read 12 books in December, resulting in 4,411 pages. So overall, it was a great way to end 2022. Unfortunately, my average rating for December was 3.25, so it wasn't that great. But as far as ratings go, I had 1 1-star, 2 2-star, 5 3-star, 1 4-star, and 3 5-stars. So as usual, I'm gonna go through them in the order that I read them in. So actually I vlogged every single one of these books this month, so if it sounds a little repetitive to you, then thank you, because that means you watched my other videos. But I did Vlogmas over the course of December where I talked about all these books, so if you haven't checked out Vlogmas, definitely go do that. But these first 3 books I did a whole separate vlog for because I read winter horror and I read 3 books for that vlog. So the first book I completed in December was for the winter horror vlog, and that was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. Now this story is told in dual timelines. We have one from the early 1900s and then one from the present day. Now in the early 1900s, we follow this married couple and they have a daughter. But something happened to this daughter, and then eventually because of it, something also happened to the mother. And so we are trying to figure out what happened and what was so horrifying about it. Now coming to present day, we follow another family who lives in this same farmhouse from 1900s, and their mother actually goes missing as well, and then the daughter ends up finding journal entries from 1900s, and she is starting to realize that the missing mothers and the mysteries might add up together. So the dual timelines really added a lot to the story for me. I felt like it really kept the story moving and really intriguing because overall this was a really slow book, but I'm finding that Jennifer McMahon's books tend to be slower, but because they are dual timeline, they read just as quickly for me because I keep flipping the pages to find out what's happening in both sets of the story. The characters, however, kind of meshed together. There were a lot of characters introduced, so it was a little bit difficult to keep them straight, but after some time, I was able to figure out and remember who was who. The snowy setting in this book really was great too. It was very isolating and snowy, and especially because they go into like a forest and a cave and stuff, so the snowy aspects were really great. The mystery, however, it was interesting, but not a lot happened until the end of the book, and by the end, I was left a little unsatisfied. Overall, I gave this book 4 stars, but I'm wondering if I should lower that rating to a 3, but I'm sticking with a 4 right now. I love Jennifer McMahon's writing so much, so I am looking forward to reading more from this author. This is my second book that I read from her, and I just feel like I'm going to continue to grow and love with her books. The next book I read was The Shuddering by Anya Alburn. Now we follow a group of people who are going to stay at this cabin in a very snowy, isolated setting once again, and in the woods around this cabin are these creatures, and they are hungry, they are starving, and they have started coming out of the woods and ripping people to shreds. So unfortunately, this book was a pretty big miss for me simply because I hated the characters. Now, don't get me wrong, the gory kill scenes were amazing and I really liked that, and it saved the book for me for being a 1-star to a 2-star because the gory, bloody scenes were really great. But there were some like weird relationship dynamics that were thrown into this book that I did not care about. I did not care about who was jealous of who wanted to be with who broke up with who. I did not care about that, and I did not care about the characters. So like I said, overall I gave this one a 2 stars just because the characters ruined the whole book for me. And the last book I read for the winter horror vlog was Bone White by Ronald Moffey. Now this book really opens with a bang because we follow this local man in this very small isolated town in Alaska called Dread's Hand. And he walks into the luncheonette and he tells them, "Y'all need to call the police because I killed a lot of people. I'm gonna be sitting at the church and they can come pick me up." So this man is a serial killer, and we also follow this other man named Paul. And a year before, his twin brother went missing, and the last location he can find his brother in was this Dread's Hand, Alaska. So he is going to Alaska to try to figure out if this serial killer is responsible for his brother's death. Now let me tell you, this book was so slow, like incredibly slow. I could have fallen asleep to it. But the second half really picked up when we were in Dread's Hand and Paul was really getting close to finding his brother, and this took a different direction than I ever thought it would. So I really love the setting of snowy, isolated Alaska because I know a lot of stuff goes down there, but overall it was just too slow for me. I still gave it 3 stars though because I was a little bit intrigued with the mystery, and the way the action picked up towards the end really had me turning the pages. So yeah, just 3 stars for this one. The next book I completed was a reread for me, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I was rereading this one through audiobook because I decided to listen to audiobooks during my running. If you don't know, I'm a runner. I was training for a half marathon, and so I was going on very long runs, so I decided to pick up Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And it's all fun and games listening to this during a 10-mile run until people start dying, and you are trying not to cry while running a very long time. But overall, I just love my reread. It hits me so hard every single time. I cry and I gasp and I laugh in all the same places as I did the very first time. So once again, 5 out of 5 stars. The next book was also a reread for me, and that is Prodigy by Marie Lu. This is the book 2 in the Legend series. So in this series, it is a YA dystopian series, and we follow 2 characters named Day and June. Day is a rebel, and June is a prodigy of the Republic. It's a YA dystopian, so you kind of know where this is going. Once again, I read this years and years ago, so I have been rereading the series in anticipation because the 4th one came out in, I think, 2019, and I never got to it, so I feel like I had to reread the story to pick up that one. But I am learning that this reread was not my favorite. I always knew that Legend was not my favorite dystopian series, but I still have nostalgia for it. But in this second book in particular, the characters started annoying me a little bit more, so I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up another sequel, and that is One Dark Throne by Kendare Blake. I read this for Buzzwordathon for December, which was to read a book with a number in the title. Now, this is the sequel to Three Dark Crowns, and it is a young adult fantasy series. So in the series, we follow triplets, and they are said to be queens of the kingdom, but when they turn 16, they have to fight to the death because there can only be one queen. In this world, there's also several different magic systems, so the triplets actually grow up in separate parts of the kingdom and grow up away from each other. So we have a naturalist who is in tune with nature, and they have animal familiars. Then we have a poisoner who they ingest poisons because it makes them feel powerful and they are immune to any poison. And then we have an elementalist who can control any element like the weather and things like that, and she is very powerful. There are also a few other magic systems involved, but those are the 3 main ones we follow. So the first book I really, really loved, except for one character ruined it from being a 5-star for me. But this one was a little bit of a downgrade from the first one. It was quite a bit longer than the first one, and I definitely felt the length. It just seemed like it was way too long, and so it was kind of slow at parts, and I just felt like it didn't need to be almost 500 pages. I will say I did come to like the character that I hated in the first book, so that was really great. And I really do enjoy all the characters in here, but the way this one ended was so painful, and I don't know where we're gonna go from here, so I'm definitely interested to see what happens next. But I still gave this one 3 out of 5 stars just because it was a little too long for me. Next, I read The Christmas Clash by Suzanne Park, and we follow characters Chloe and Peter. And Chloe and Peter have been rivals their whole life because their families own competing Asian restaurants in their local mall. They literally have restaurants across the way from each other, so their families are kind of rivals and enemies and always tell them, don't interact with that family because they are bad news. But something happens where the mall is getting sold and demolished, so Peter and Chloe might have to work together to save the mall and their family's restaurants. So this book, first of all, it is called The Christmas Clash, but there really was not a lot of Christmas in here. But I did really like the setting of being in a mall, so for the most part, we were in a mall the whole time. Peter and Chloe, not only do they have family restaurants in the mall, but they also have separate jobs. So it was really cool to have a mall setting. But Peter and Chloe, I feel like their rivalry wasn't fleshed out enough. I feel like they became friends and love interests way too soon, and so I didn't feel any kind of high stakes or anything with their relationship because I just felt like they fell into a friendship really easily. But yeah, it was still fun to read, but I was just missing a little bit of the exploration of their relationship, and there were also a lot of problems and plot devices introduced in this book that I just felt like weren't needed or were just not fleshed out enough, so I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I decided to pick up a graphic novel, and that is Coven by Jennifer Dugan and Kit Seaton. So we follow a girl named MZ, and she is living her best life in California with her best friend and her girlfriend, and she loves to surf. but one day her parents come into her room and tell her, someone back home in New York has been murdered, so we need to go home and rejoin our coven. Now, MC has grown up her whole life knowing she's a witch, but because she has grown up apart from her coven, she really hasn't explored her fire powers or really had anything to do with her witchy coven side, and so she is really down about having to go back to New York. So her and her family, they move back to meet with the coven and try to find out who killed this other family and try to not be killed themselves. I loved this book so much. I'm not a witchy person, but I thought the witchiness in here was really fun. But what did it for me was the art style was just really beautiful, and there were like fall colors, there were pastel colors, and everything just fit the mood absolutely perfectly, and I just fell in love with the art style so much. I also really liked the characters in here and the exploration of grief and how people deal with things very differently, especially because MZ was grieving having to leave her girlfriend and her friends and move across the country, but then we have a character in here who is grieving the loss of his family, and so there's just different explorations of that and trying to basically live your life as a teenager when you're going through hard things. Also, the murder mystery on top of that. I just fell in love with this so completely, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Not to mention, this book smells really good. Next, I read A Baggage Claim by Juliana Smith, and we follow 2 characters in this story, Olive and Finn. Now, Olive lives in Florida, but she is having to fly home to Colorado after 3 years of not seeing her family. All we know is that something major happened to make her run away from her family and never talk to her sister again, but she is finally being guilt-tripped into visiting her family, so she is flying to Colorado and she is not happy about it. So she's on the plane, and who sits next to her but arrogant, attractive Finn. And when Finn finds out that Olive told her parents that she is bringing home a boyfriend, even though she doesn't have one, Finn agrees to be her fake boyfriend. So already we have the fake dating trope, but this also takes place over Christmas in Colorado, so the Christmas vibes were amazing. They did so many Christmas activities because Finn is also trying to convince Olive not to be a Grinch and that Christmas can be fun, so he is taking her on a 12 days of Christmas dates, and it is just so much fun. I loved all the Christmas vibes, but I was also worried that Finn was going to be too arrogant, but I really did like him, and I liked Olive as well. And let me tell you, the conflict and her not talking to her sister or seeing her family for 3 years was absolutely justified in my opinion. Like, I would fight for Olive because of what happened, but I really love this and I had so much fun with it, so I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So next I read 'Tis the Season for Revenge by Morgan Elizabeth. So we follow a character named Abby, and she is dating this guy named Richard. Now, Richard is awful and extremely abusive, but Abby is blind to that. And she thinks Richard is going to propose, but instead he breaks up with her. So she wants revenge on him, and what is the best revenge but by getting with his boss, who he absolutely hates. And by that, she wants to get invited to the Christmas party that Richard never took her to and walk in with her boss on her arm and see Richard's face. So let me tell you. This book, we have Abby and Damien, and now Damien is the boss and the love interest. Over the course of the book, I wanted to fight both of them. I hated Abby and I hated Damien. I feel like Damien is also a bunch of red flags, and I just didn't get on board with anything he was saying or doing. I also felt like he was very toxic in a different way than Richard was, but I still felt like he was not a great guy. Abby, on the other hand, is a complete idiot, and I just don't like her. I understand the cycle of abuse, but some of the things she was doing and saying just don't get. Also, the fact that this relationship was built on a lie that Damien wasn't even aware of just didn't sit right with me. Now, I love the whole fake dating trope, but the fact that only Abby was aware of what was happening and Damien was falling for her just didn't sit right with me. Didn't like that. Overall, hated the characters, I hated the spicy scenes, I hated the way he talked to her, so I gave this one 1 out of 5 stars. Next was another reread for me, and that is Champion by Marie Lu. This is book 3 in the Legend series, and this one really surprised me because I realized I forgot a lot about what happened, and I think it's because I blocked it out, because the way this ends is one of my least favorite tropes ever used. I hated this trope so much, and I've seen it used a few times, and every time I see it used, my enjoyment immediately plummets. So I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. And the last book I read in December and 2022, I finished it on the very last day of the year, was The Firekeeper by J.C. Cervantes. Now this is the sequel to The Storm Runner, and this is under Rick Riordan Presents imprint, and we follow Mayan mythology. So we follow a character named Zane, and in the story he is half god, like most of these mythology books, and he is being hidden away because the gods actually want to kill the Godborns because they are worried the Godborns will actually kill the gods. So it's interesting because Zane actually has a disability and has to walk with a cane, but that is where his god ability comes in. It comes through his disability, and so it's interesting because it shows you that his disability is what makes him powerful. But I really like Zane as a character, and I really like how we explore Mayan mythology because I don't know a lot about it. But unfortunately in this book I was losing interest a bit. There would be times where I was really interested, and then there would be times where I was zoning out throughout the story. I'm still interested in completing the series, but I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of December. Let me know your favorite book that you read, and if you've made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave the snowflake emoji. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, all my social media links will be down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!